Oke. Mulai Mas Ade. Dear all participants, the webinar will begin. Please have a nice seat in your home, office, or wherever you are now. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Honorable, our great speaker today, Dr. Vijayan Sugumaran, B.Tech, MS, Ph.D. Honorable, the all faculty members of Kadiri University and all students of Kadiri University, and also the happy participant. Welcome to our webinar today about the role of artificial intelligence or machine learning in fighting COVID-19 with our great speaker, Dr. Vijayan Sugumaran, B.Tech, MS, Ph.D. from Oakland University, Rochester, Michigan, USA. Allow me, first of all, to read the short biography of Dr. Vijay. I want to share screen. Can you help me? Okay, Dr. Vijayan Sugumaran B.Tech MS PhD is the Distinguished Professor of Management Information System and Chair of the Department of Decision and Information Science of Oakland University, Rochester, Michigan, USA. He is also the co-director of the Center for Data Science and Big Data Analytics at Oakland University. And then he also received his PhD program in the information technology from George Mason University, Fairfax, Virginia, USA. And his research interests are in the areas of big data management and analytics, ontologies, and semantic web, intelligent agent, and multi-agent system. He has published over 275 peer review of articles in journal, conference, and books. He also has edited 20 books in served the additional part of a journal, and also has published in top 10 journals such as Information System Research, ACM Transaction of Database System, Communication of the ACM, IEEE Transaction on Big Data, IEEE Transaction of Engineering Management, IEEE Transaction on Education, IEEE Transaction of Cybernetics, IEEE Multimedia, and also IEEE Software. And Dr. Vijay Sukumaran is also the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Intelligent Information Technologies. He is also the chair of Intelligent Agent and Multi-Agent System Unitrack for American Conference on Information System, and also has served the program chair for the 40th workshop of e-business, International Conference on Application of Natural Language to Information System. And last, he also the regular served as a program committee member for numerous national and international conference. Okay, that's the short biography of Dr. Vijay. And next, the time for Dr. Vijay for delivering the material. Good morning, Dr. Vijay. Are you ready with your presentation? Good morning, Dr. Vijay. Dr. Vijay, you still unmute?
Oh, that always happens, doesn't it?
Okay. Okay, I can hear your voice. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning, Dr. Vijayan.
Namaste.
Namaste, namaste. Selamat siang. I just learned it this morning.
Okay. Okay, doctor. The time for you for delivering your presentation and have a nice webinar with our faculty member and our students.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm very happy and honored to speak with everyone at Kadiri University. I have interacted with Dr. Vijayan and Rahul for some time now, and so I'm very delighted to speak with everyone. So let me share my screen. So this morning I'm going to have kind of two presentations. So the first presentation is about the role of AI and machine learning in combating pandemics, particularly COVID-19, for example, right? So can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
Okay. So for the first 25, 30 minutes or so, I will kind of go through this presentation a little bit. And then in the second half, I have another presentation where I want to talk about our university, and we have signed an MOU with Kadiri University, and we will be signing some more agreements for student exchange, faculty exchange, and things like that. So I'm looking forward to working with the faculty and students at Kadiri, organizing different events and activities. And I welcome everyone to come and visit Oakland University. We are located in Michigan, so I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Okay. In the first presentation, artificial intelligence, machine learning has been sort of the key topic these days, right? So we find machine learning, deep learning applications in our day-to-day life for text processing, for um, video processing. We have bots, so there's all kinds of applications we see in our day-to-day life. And so, you know, in the medical domain, obviously, there are lots of machine learning and AI applications as well. So, one of the emphasis in the medical domain, particularly having gone through this pandemic the last 2 years, is more accelerated research in applying artificial intelligence and machine learning in the medical domain, particularly being able to deal with pandemics like the COVID-19 that we just had, right? And so AI or ML can be used in many different areas. Here are some of them that I have listed. These are not the complete list. These are some areas that people have started working on. So we can use machine learning or AI, for example, to identify who are the people that are most at risk. When a pandemic hits, which segment of the population would be the most at risk? So we could do some machine learning modeling to be able to predict some of those things. We can use machine learning for diagnostic purposes, for diagnosing patients, right? Based upon their symptoms, uh, can we predict or who has the virus, in their system, right? Based on the symptoms and other physical characteristics. AI has been used for drug development for a long time, and now there is more renewed interest in new drug development or drug repurposing. So there's a lot of potential for artificial intelligence to be applied there as well. Um, and we can do some modeling of how a disease would spread over a period of time. And so disease spreading modeling has been an active area of research as well. And we can also, apply or build models to understand the viruses themselves better, how they propagate, how they attach to, human cells, and so on and so forth, right? And so being able to predict the next pandemic, right? So everybody's afraid that when is the next pandemic going to hit? Not that we have, come out of the current pandemic, but at least, it hasn't, it's not that bad at the moment. So when will the next big pandemic hit? So can we do some prediction using AI and all? And so these are some of the areas, where we could apply our standard modeling techniques, right? So in the next few minutes, we will spend a little bit more time talking about each of these areas of application. So we could use AI ML kind of models for risk assessment. Right? So risk assessment is done in many different domains. So in the financial domain, we do risk assessment when we build systems, manufacturing systems, or any kind of system. We do risk assessment, and so we can do risk assessment in the medical domain as well. So, for example, infection risk, right? Uh, so being able to predict the risk of infection. In other words, given certain demographic information about a segment of the population, let's say, for example, based on age, pre-existing conditions, general, hygiene habits, social habits, and so on and so forth, right? So we have a lot of demographic information that we collect. So can we use those uh, demographic information to predict which region or which location or which uh, segment of the population is at higher risk for a particular infection, right? And so we can build a lot of very sophisticated machine learning models for assessing and managing risk. The other area of risk assessment is the severity. So even when people get infected, some people, are not affected that much, whereas somebody else, would be affected very gravely, and then sometimes it, leads to death, right? And so, how can we predict the severity of the infection, right? Uh, Based on um, many different factors, right? And so being able to predict whether somebody would have acute respiratory distress syndrome, right? So that we can plan accordingly. And so who is at risk of mortality, right? And who is not. If we know that, then we can allocate our assets appropriately. So assessing the severity risk is another area where we can use AI ML kinds of models. Okay? And then another type of risk assessment is the outcome, right? And so if we have different treatments, who can gain the most out of these kinds of treatments? Or in other words, uh, for whom is it effective and for whom it is not so effective, right? And so we can build machine learning kinds of models and come up with personalized treatment plans for specific types of demographic segments, right? And so being able to assess the severity and then being able to predict the outcome, these are all areas where we can use machine learning and AI kinds of models. Because we have collected a lot of data over the last 2 years, ever since the pandemic hit, we have been collecting lots and lots of data, different groups of people, their habits, so on and so forth. So then we also have actual hard data about, who was hit hard, who didn't get affected that much, right? So we have lots of data, so we can use that data to do a lot of modeling. Another area where we could use machine learning kinds of applications is for uh, diagnosing COVID-19, right? And so, uh, unless you do a test, at least early on, for example, the US and even in other countries, the test kits were not available that easily, right? And so people had to wait a long time to get the results. And so, can we have other technologies that we can use to be able to quickly identify or diagnose whether someone has the virus or not, right? So maybe using facial scan and identify symptoms and things like that, right? Or maybe use wearable technologies, uh, such as like smartwatches and things of that nature to kind of uh, see if there's any consistent pattern in terms of a heart rate raising during certain time periods or whatever the case may be, right? And so we can use a lot of these additional tools or intelligent tools to be able to diagnose the spread of the virus. Right? And we can have question answering systems or chatbots kind of systems where, based on what people report or what people search on the net, we can try to figure out who or where the disease is spreading. So there are a lot of opportunities for applying machine learning or AI kinds of modeling for diagnostic purposes as well. Drug development is another area where AI is used quite heavily. Any drug development or drug repurposing project would always start with looking at existing literature and then trying to find out what are the different chemicals that interact with different proteins, for example, right? And so protein interaction, drug protein interaction, what enzymes interact with what drugs, and things like that. So in the medical literature, lots of these things are discussed, but then it's very difficult for one person or a group of people to go through the entire literature and then come up with something interesting or useful. And so in this context, AI, particularly deep learning models, named entity recognition kinds of models have been applied to kind of figure out what chemicals are effective against what kinds of proteins. What are some of the potential candidates, chemicals for vaccines and things like that. So in drug development, AI is used, quite heavily. So we have worked on a few projects related to that as well. So repurposing drugs is another area. So developing new drugs takes a very long time, as you know. And so part of the emphasis is that if we know existing drugs interact with certain types of proteins, certain types of enzymes, and so when a new virus comes in, maybe we can look at the existing drugs that seem to interact with these kinds of viruses or proteins, and then start with those kinds of chemicals and proteins and use that as a starting point for uh, kind of modifying existing drugs or at least use them as a starting point, right? And so for drug repurposing, AI is also quite useful. By looking at the existing literature, we can build a knowledge base in terms of knowledge graphs and make that information available to the medical community. So we can do a lot of text processing and data mining, text analytics kinds of stuff, and then extract a lot of useful information with respect to uh, drugs, chemicals, how they affect various viruses or proteins that are part of the viruses. Right? And so AI and machine learning would be quite applicable in this domain as well. Predicting spread of the infectious diseases. So we could do a lot of social network analysis and then use that information to kind of predict how this disease might spread for a period of time. So, I mean, this has been done in other domains as well. Social network analytics is quite powerful in terms of being able to model how information spreads, for example, on the internet, right? So it's sort of the same idea. And so looking at what people search on the net or what kinds of questions or uh, names of drugs that people are searching for, we get a sense of where are some hotspots, for example, right? So we could use a lot of this social network analytics tools to be able to predict how the disease would spread over a period of time. So another area is understanding the viruses themselves, right? And so if you think of every virus, it's made up of lots of proteins and enzymes, and that's what a virus is, right? If you think of the COVID-19 virus, it has lots of proteins. There's a spike protein that's part of COVID-19 virus that actually is the main protein that helps the virus stick to a human cell, for example, right? And so there are the SARS-19 virus has about, I believe, about 20 or 23 proteins in all. And so if we can understand what these proteins actually do, then we can try to look for chemicals or drugs that interact with these proteins, and we can try to contain them, right? And so in this context, a lot of modeling, a lot of AI applications are very useful, right? The other area where AI has been used, continue to be used, is predicting how protein folds. In other words, how proteins interact with each other. And so, having artificial neural networks, we can model how these protein structures would evolve over a period of time. And so, when the viruses spreads, basically proteins, interact with each other, and then they form new proteins, and then they replicate. So if we can understand that process, then we have a better chance of containing the virus or developing chemicals and drugs that can interfere and sort of slow that process down. Right? So that's where a lot of AI and machine learning could also be applied. And so understanding the viruses themselves, the structures of the proteins that are part of the virus. Once we understand that, then it's a matter of finding out what drug is effective in arresting a particular protein, right? And so then it becomes easier to try different chemicals or different drugs and see their effect on these various protein structures. Okay. So, like I said, we have to kind of get into the cellular level at the biological level, right? And so, if you look at a virus, it contains lots of epitopes. These are nothing but clusters of amino acids found on the surface of the virus. And so these amino acids interact with the human cells, or any cell for that matter, and then the various proteins then kind of bond with each other, and then they kind of start to replicate. Okay? And so understanding how this process actually happens, and if we are able to model these kinds of processes, then it gives us a way to simulate different scenarios or different conditions, right? And so that's how the viruses mutate, for example, right? So we can try to model a lot of those things using standard machine learning and AI kinds of models, right? And so things like support vector machine or hidden Markov models, artificial neural networks or deep learning models. So these are all models that we can use to kind of understand better how the viruses actually interact with other cells, human or otherwise. And once we understand that process, then it's easier for us to develop appropriate chemicals and drugs to interfere with that process. So like I mentioned before, so COVID-19 is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, right? It contains the spike protein, which is sort of the main protein that causes it to attach to human cells, right? And then it also contains a lot of envelope proteins, membrane proteins, and nucleocapsid proteins. And so understanding what each of these proteins do and how they function is very crucial, right? And so, for example, the spike protein kind of interacts with the human cell or the host cell, on the AC2 enzyme, the angiotensin converting enzyme. And so that's the main enzyme that interacts with the spike protein. So once that protein sort of fuses, then the virus actually attaches itself to the human cell, and then it starts to replicate, right? And so there's the protein called mpro, which is the main protein that's responsible for the duplication of the cells, right? So if we understand this process, then we can target these specific processes, the uh, proteins, you know, which drugs have in the past interacted with these kinds of proteins, right? And so instead of starting from all known chemicals, at least we have a good starting point for experimentation, right? And so that's where a lot of these AI deep learning kinds of models actually are quite useful. Okay? And so we can uh, target some primary chemicals that interact with, let's say, the empro protein, and we can also target or try to find other chemicals that enhance this process sort of at the secondary level as well, right? And so what is the primary protein that's causing the replication, for example? What chemical can we find to stop that process? What are the other proteins and enzymes that sort of promote this or accelerate this process? Maybe we can start to look for drugs that can target those kinds of proteins as well, right? And so a lot of this modeling work is very useful because then we can do a lot of simulation, right? Uh, so doing this in real life, live testing, is not feasible, right? And so only way to get faster drug development is through a lot of simulation and a lot of modeling. So that's where the deep learning models come into the picture. So there's a little bit more details about how deep learning models can be used for augmenting this drug development process itself, right? And so the idea is, once we understand the actual biological process and when the cells replicate, right? And so we understand uh, what molecules are formed and what chemicals can be used to either stop them or maybe destroy them, right? And so this allows us to kind of attack this problem in a systematic way. We can also use machine learning and reinforcement learning kinds of models. And so, we understand the basic process. And so then we can generate, new molecules based off of the original understanding of the process. Then we can also see what additional chemicals can be thrown into the mix so that we can either slow down this process or maybe even completely eliminate the process, right? And so using transfer learning kinds of approaches, we can understand the overall process much faster, and that can lead to developing appropriate drugs and chemicals to deal with this virus, right? And so there is a big role or a big impact that artificial intelligence can make in this pandemic situation. As you know, the vaccines were developed in a very, very fast manner, right? And so a lot of the work had already been done in terms of modeling and trying out different combinations of drugs and things like that, right? And so uh, we can use the power of uh, artificial intelligence and the data processing capability to be able to accelerate the process of drug discovery. And so, that's where a lot of the action is. And so, if people have good background in AI or data analytics or biology, molecular biology, so all of these areas are coming together in dealing with the pandemic situation, right? So either we can quickly find new drugs, or we can try to see which of the existing drugs can be used or repurposed to deal with the viruses, the new viruses that are formed, right? And so, for example, chloroquine or hydrochloroquine, these are all chemicals that have already been around, and they've been shown to have a direct impact on the SARS virus, particularly the spike protein, for example. And so that's why hydroxychloroquine was one of the early drugs that were used to kind of counteract the impact of the SARS virus. Right? In a nutshell, there are lots and lots of applications of machine learning and artificial intelligence in the medical domain, particularly in drug development. There are lots of other areas where AI machine learning is also used, like for example in diagnostic domain, using images, CT scans, and MRI images. There are sophisticated image processing algorithms that people have developed that can pick out malignant cells and things like that. So AI and ML play a very big role in the medical domain, particularly in the diagnostic space, and also being able to deal with pandemic situations or in general viruses, how they spread, how they interact with the host cells. Can we model them? What proteins and what enzymes drives the whole process? If we understand all of those, then we can model them, we can study them, and we can simulate uh, different scenarios and use that information to develop new drugs or maybe repurpose existing drugs. Okay? And so lots of data, lots of interesting tools and algorithms and models related to AI and machine learning, and we have a lot of computing power as well. And so the combination of all of these factors is kind of helping us to get a better handle on any pandemic or the pandemic that we just are going through. And so there's a very big demand for AI or data analytics kinds of degrees, all over the world, not just in the U.S. And so, programs in applied AI, applied mathematics, and applied data analytics. These are all areas where there's significant demand in, in the industry. Anyway, so I think probably I should stop here with this presentation. Any questions so far on it? I know I talked nonstop for the last half hour or so. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next phase of the presentation?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vijay, for your very amazing presentation. And then for the first session, I would like to ask 5 questions from the audience to ask directly to Dr. Vijay, not in chat box. So I will try to, is it okay, sir? I will point them one by one to ask the question directly to you.
Yes, yes, sure, sure, of course, of
Okay.
course.
Okay, the first one from, wait. Okay, so many questions, sir. The first one from Arifki. Arifki, the student from engineering faculty. Okay, please, Arifki, say directly to Dr. Vijay about the questions.
Hello, can you hear my voice?
Okay, very clear.
Yes, yes.
Okay. My name is Rifki. I'm from Kadiri University, especially from industrial engineering. I'd like to ask you some questions. How do people think about using this method in dealing with problems about virus? Thank you.
Is it
There was a
clear,
little
sir?
bit of a static. I was not
Okay.
able to quite hear well.
Yeah. Please repeat
Beta,
once
can
again.
you repeat the question?
Okay, okay,
Okay.
okay. Uh, How do people think about using this method in dealing with problems about virus?
How do people think about the? Can
About
you
this
can
approach,
you get the point, sir?
sort of a mixed bag, if you will. People that understand the tools and technologies know exactly how they work, and so they don't have very any kind of issues. Whereas people that don't have a background in AI or machine learning kinds of stuff, it's like a black box to them. And so it's like, I don't know what is happening. I build a model, I get an output, and then, I just use that output, right? So without understanding exactly how the model works. And so, there's a little bit of skepticism. There's no question about that. Uh, but then people who understand the technology and how it works and how it is being applied, as long as they can show some good results, I think eventually people would come around accepting the results. Another question is, given the vaccines were developed so quickly, right? And so a lot of people were very, very hesitant to take those vaccines because traditionally it takes about 10 years or so to develop a vaccine. But the COVID-19 vaccines were developed in a matter of less than a year. And so, because it was a completely different technology, the RNA technology has never been used. And so people were very skeptical. But then, with over time, people, saw the effectiveness and, accepted it. There are still some people that don't accept it. And so it's not going to be 100%. Right? So more education is needed. I guess that would be one way to answer the question. Okay.
Okay. Rifki, are you satisfied? Are you happy with the answer from Dr. Vijay?
Yes, okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next question, sir. There are many questions. I will point Mr. Agung, my good partner from UNB Kadiri. Hello, Mr. Agung.
Hi there.
Okay, please ask a question to Dr. Vijay.
Okay, thank you. Hi Vijay. Thank you so much. So it's very interesting about your topic here. I just curious about how the AI predict the spread of the disease. As long as I know, special or specific machine that created because of the conditions of the country. First is related with human habits, and the second one with the geography. Is this also possible to apply this machine in tropical countries and also in subtropical countries? Thank you.
That's a very good question. So, how things spread, let's say, for example, in Western countries, uh, may not be the same in tropical regions or subtropical regions. And so,
Yeah.
the, the base model could be developed using a certain geographic location and conditions, and then trying to extend those models based on local conditions, right? And so, yes, you are right. Maybe the model may not be perfect in all parts of the world, but I think the idea is that, so you develop a base model using a given set of parameters, given set of geographical conditions, given set of people's habits and things like that. Once we create a sort of a reference model, then we can extend the model by changing the values of parameters to suit the different locations, for example, right? And so, that is usually done in many areas, like even simple things like modeling how a fire spreads, for example, right? So people have developed lots of models predicting how a fire would spread given a certain set of conditions, right? but those conditions may not be the same in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. And so typically what they do is they take the same model, but then adjust the parameters to suit the local conditions and see how the model performs, right? And so we will sort of use the same idea in predicting the disease spread for the pandemic. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, thank you so much, though. I think that is the AI it will be take over of the human being and also will help a lot how to solve the problems, especially in health. Yeah. Thank you so much for the explanation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Still more question, Doctor, from my student Sabrina Ilmi. Please ask a question to Dr. Vijay. Sabrina, can you hear my voice? Okay, we skip first. Okay, Mr. Jatmiko, you have a question? Please ask directly.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Rita. Hi, Dr. Vijayan Sugumaran.
Yes.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Doctor. Okay, I think I have the some curious about this artificial intelligence. I think it's very important for me to solve my queries about this material, especially about this machine learning. And my question is it possible if we use the artificial intelligence or machine learning in the technical care for the chronic disease, especially for the like a typical model, the characteristic symptom with the other pneumonia disease like the SARS, MERS, and pulmonary tuberculosis. It is possible, doctor, if we use the artificial intelligence?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction to that question would be, yes, I think it would be possible. And so anytime we develop models targeting a particular disease or a particular domain, we are trying to understand what features in that domain are important, how they have an impact, right? And so the same approach, the methodology could be applied in different disciplines. The features and the data used would be obviously quite different, but then the process of developing the models would still be the same. Right? Whether I develop a deep learning model for breast cancer diagnosis, or whether I am developing a deep learning model for lung cancer. So those are different types of cancers, but then the process of developing the model is still sort of the same, right? And so, the process could be applied to different contexts, but then we have to be sensitive to the important features or factors that have an impact that drive the process and be able to correctly model them. I think that's where the difficulty is. And so, I cannot have one single model and then just apply it to different situations. Then that might not work. But then the process of building that model would still be the same, right? But we will be using different data and different features, how to manipulate these features so that the model learns from the data. So all of the basic kinds of things would still be the same.
Okay, thank you very much for, I think, the great explanation, doctor. Thank you so much.
Are you happy, Mr. Jatmiko,
Yeah.
with the answer?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, Dr. Vijayan, still more question from our participant. Okay, I give the time for Dr. Angga. Please ask the question, Dr. Angga.
Thank you. Hello, Professor Vijay.
Hello.
It's nice for me to meet you. Well, Professor, as I know from what you described before, I think that AI, or especially and machine learning, are only do the formula that have programmed to it before about what decision should be made for a specific condition of patient. So I have some one question about the patient safety. Let's say if the input or maybe a program there is program before for this machine learning or AI is wrong or unreliable, it means that the result will be wrong as well, and it will give a bad impact to the patient, like maybe harm the patient or maybe causing a death, etc. If this is happen, then who will take the responsibility for this bad condition, or is the countermeasure for this? That's my question, Professor. Thank you.
Yes, that is the million-dollar question, my friend. Anga. That's what everybody is, kind of trying to work on, right? So yes, you're absolutely correct. So I can build a machine learning model, AI model, and use it quite effectively. As long as things go okay, everybody's happy. But sometimes things don't go, as expected, right? And so who is responsible, right? And so that's why, particularly in the medical domain, so the laws are not quite there yet. So at least in the U.S., for example, lawmakers are working very hard to come up with laws that can govern what happens when some of these newer tools and technologies are used in the medical domain and things go wrong, right? Who is responsible, right? And so you even though we use a lot of these tools and techniques in the medical domain, they are not the only source for decision making. So just because my predictive model said this is going to happen, a doctor cannot make a final decision just based on that. They have to have other supporting evidence in order to make the call. So this is only one source of information, maybe a very reliable source of information in certain cases, but nevertheless, you can't use this as a single source of information for decision making. And so that's why all of these are used as secondary source of information, uh, precisely because of the point that you made. Because these models are black boxes, we don't know exactly how they work. They work well, but then sometimes when they don't, then we get in trouble. I mean, life or death is a big problem. So obviously one has to be very careful. Even simple cases like when you apply for a loan in a bank, right? And so you fill out an application, and then the loan officer looks at it, and maybe they use some sort of a machine learning model to figure out, hey, is this person going to repay the loan or not? If, for example, the model said, no, this is not a good customer, don't give him the loan, then the loan officer, let's say if the loan application is rejected, then they have to explain to the customer why that loan was rejected. You can't say, well, my AI model said reject the loan, so I'm going to reject the loan. You can't do that. So there are laws in the country that says you have to explain why the loan was rejected, right? And so it's the same case, a lot more serious when it's life and death, right? Um, but you're absolutely right. So that's why there is this big area called um, responsible AI, ethical AI, and so that's the if somebody's interested in doing research in this space, these are some current areas of research. Ethical AI, responsible AI. How do we build AI models that are explainable? Explainable AI, that's another area, right? So all of these are sort of looking at the dark side of AI, right? And so if everything goes well, it's good, but you know, stuff happens. A lot of times, bad things happen, right? And so, we have to have laws, to protect the customer. So, it's work in progress. Okay, but that's a very good question. A lot of research is needed. Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Bisa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Angga. Dr. Vijay, is still three more questions. Is it okay for you?
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
Okay, next question from the students. from Ali Zainal from Social and Politics Science, if I'm not mistaken. Please, Ali Zainal, the time for you to ask the questions for Dr. Vijay.
Okay, thank you, Miss Pita. Hello, Dr. Vijay. Nice to meet you in here. My name is Ali from Public Administration Study Program in Kadiri University. I want to ask, can the use of AI or ML be used in the field of government in the pandemic condition? And whatever, the American government has used AI and ML in full. Thank you.
A good question. So, I mean, I wouldn't say the government is using it, but there are a lot of research organizations that use AI ML. The Center for Disease Control, for example, right? And so they use a lot of quantitative modeling to be able to predict, the number of infections, over a period of time, right? So there are a lot of mathematical models that are being used, and AI models also used for prediction, right? But then they would also, try and collect data from the field to make sure that these models are actually predicting correctly. So it is easy for us to build some model and then uh, uh, predict some numbers, but then we have to also verify whether these predictions are actually correct. And so the Center for Disease Control, collects a lot of data throughout the U.S., for example, and then whatever models that they are using to do the prediction, they always, check whether these numbers are actually correct. If the numbers are not correct, then they will go back and change the model parameters a little bit. And so it's an evolving process. Um, and so the short answer to your question is yes, I think, a lot of the research organizations that support CDC do use all of these models. Yes. Also, like for example, from University of Michigan, there's a bioinformatics group that did a lot of modeling work for the spread of the virus in India, for example. So yes, different organizations do make use of these models, but then they always have to validate the model. If the model is saying one thing, but the reality is something different, then they will have to go back and modify their models. And it's a continuous process as well.
Oh,
Satisfied, Ali Zainal?
okay, thank
Okay,
you.
still three more
Thanks, Ali.
questions, Doctor. From Budiva, please, the time is yours. Budiva? Okay, still not
Yes,
active?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, can you ask the questions? Because you raised your hand.
yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Vijayan. So I want to ask about the role of the AI or ML in dealing with viral pandemics. So the point is that understanding viruses better. So as you said that in in your slide, there is understanding viruses through proteins. So, how many percent do you think that the accuracy of the prediction of the AI and or the ML to understand the viruses? And then so it can help the doctors to find the drug faster. You get the point, sir?
Also, how, in other words, if I restate the question, we can build all of these models, but then how effective are they? How uh, quickly or how efficiently can they produce the results, right? And does it uh, reflect the reality? Is that the question, right?
No, the percentage of the accuracy of the prediction from the AI or the ML to understand the viruses.
Right. Yeah. So,
Yes.
the accuracy of these models, you know, they are fairly high. Probably in a high 90 percentage accuracies, for example. So, but that is limited to the data that we collect, right? And so the accuracy is based on whatever data that we use to train these models and then testing these models. But this data evolves over a period of time. If it is static, we can build very efficient models. If things don't change, then we can train the model with more data, and then they become, very accurate, right? However, this is a moving target, and so, to maintain uh, certain level of accuracy might be difficult because if I train the model using one set of data, and then when I apply it to a different set of data, the underlying characteristics of the data has changed because maybe the virus has evolved over time, right? And so they have to be able to make some modifications and still maintain certain level of accuracy. So maybe not 99%, but maybe low 90s or something like that. So whatever the acceptable threshold is, I think that's what the doctors would be kind of looking at, right? But for well-defined problems, the accuracy would be pretty good. Like for example, in image processing, being able to detect cancer cells, we have built, very sophisticated deep learning models that actually performs better than humans. They are, 99.99% accurate in picking out malignant cells. Even the radiologists who look at the images sometimes miss it. So, in certain applications, these models are very, very effective. Yeah. But it depends on the type of the model and the application, the problem that we're trying to solve.
Enough, Budiva.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, answer.
Two more questions, doctor, from Sabrina Ilmi. Please ask a question.
All right.
Sabrina.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, Sabrina.
All right. My name is Sabrina. I'm from Kadiri University, especially on pharmacy health faculty. All right. Here I will ask to you. With existence of ML and AI, it is possible if we do not use living creature just like mice, monkey, or even the human for experimental media.
So,
Because we know somehow we want to stop the cruelty to the animal or living creature. If it's possible, how the process work?
how to understand the process of how viruses spread in animals? Is that the question? I'm not sure I understand the question, Sabrina. Can can you repeat that question, please? So, can we apply the AI models for not only humans but for other animals as well? Is that the question?
Sabrina, can you repeat your questions?
All right. With the existence of ML and AI, it is possible if we don't use living creature just like mice, monkey, or even the human of for experimental media. Because we know somehow we want to stop the cruelty to the animal or other living creature.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah.
If it's possible, how it's work.
Right. We do a lot of experiments, using the animals. Unfortunately, that's how the medicine field grows, right? And so, a lot of experiments are done on mice and monkeys to start with, to see the effect of certain drugs on certain genes, right? And so once we understand the process and we get to a state where we have some models available that we use for humans, the same kind of drugs could be, could be used for animals as well, right? Sort of going full circle back. We start with the animals, try to understand the process, we develop something for the human beings, and then once we have some solution, then we should be able to translate that back to the animal world, which we can use to care for them as well, right? Because as we know, SARS, or the COVID-19 spread not only humans, but also animals also got, cats and dogs, and even, in the US, some of the lions and tigers also got the COVID-19 virus, right? And so we should be able to use the similar kinds of approaches of treating the humans applied to the animals as well, I would think, right? So, I mean, the short answer to the question would be, once we understand the process, then we should be able to apply the same kind of treatments to other living organisms as well, not just humans. Maybe we may have to provide, some adjustments in terms of the quantity of the drugs or dosage and things like that. But the virus acts sort of very similar in the host cells. And so all of these drugs are developed to kind of stop what the virus proteins do. And so we can use the similar process for treating animals. So, yeah. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Is it satisfying, Sabrina, the answer from Dr. Vijay? Can you catch the point?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, Dr. Vijay, one more
Thank
question
you.
from
Okay.
my student, from Johan Alfian. Mr. Johan, can you
Yes,
hear my
thanks.
voice? Okay.
Yes,
Please
thank you,
ask the
Sabrina.
question. Yeah, it is related with your expertise, yeah, about web and etc. Maybe you can ask the question freely. Please ask.
Hey, Dr. Vijay. I'm from Industrial Engineering Kadiri University. I would like to review and ask about the keyword I captured from the presentation of material where machine learning, medicinal product, pharmaceutical industry. Here, I captured the machine learning is deeply embedded in our field of industrial engineering, particularly manufacturing industry. I connected the role of machine learning into practicum in our study program, namely product design. That I'm thinking that pharmaceutical drugs can be mass produced using a 3D printer. However, the weakness here is the need for more complex 3D printer specification to be programmed to find out the composition or percentage of the composition of the drug to be produced. Atomically, it is require an expert programmer and pharmaceutical expert. On the other hand, it also require an analyst who can describe or explain the production process in sequence. Our question is, has the integration of 3D printer and development of pharmaceutical drugs been thoroughly implemented outside your country? Thank you.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. So, I mean, obviously, 3D printing has been around for a while, and so what are the compounds or chemicals that go into the 3D printing will affect how the final product behaves in terms of the strength and what kind of load it can take and things like that. So, I mean, I do see an analogy in terms of using AI, machine learning models for drug development, sort of applied similar modeling for composition of materials for 3D printing. Um, but I'm, but I don't know of any work that has already been done in that space. To be honest, this is the first time that I'm even thinking about that. Uh, because I think when you're thinking about drug development, you're basically focusing on what chemicals interact with what proteins, and we're trying to kind of model that interaction. So in a 3D printing, we have chemicals, compounds that we inject, and then they need to stick together. And so maybe there is some similarity, but I'm not sure that entire work would be applicable for the manufacturing domain, particularly 3D printing. I mean, that's an interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that question. So I might start looking into the literature and see if people have thought about this sort of application. Yeah.
Yes, it is has been applied in our practicum of activity. This is indeed very interesting for use, especially for research activities. Yes.
I mean, I think it would be quite a good research topic because, as you start to, in 3D printing, and the basic idea is you heat up, some plastic or whatever, chemical or metal, and then you fuse it together, right? And so what are the chemical properties, in terms of when these different chemicals sort of fuse together, what would be the physical characteristics of the compound that gets generated? Could be modeled, I suppose. But we also need a lot of data to be able to model that as well. So that could be one limitation, because the 3D printing domain is relatively new compared to the medical domain. So getting the appropriate data might be a little bit of an issue. But nevertheless, I think this would be an interesting question, interesting topic to see the similarity and how the results from that domain could be applied to manufacturing, particularly 3D printing.
Yes, Mr. Vijay. Jadi, this is a development or as a collaboration within Kadiri University. It is a activity you research.
Oh, wonderful. I would love to learn more about it and then maybe even participate in some of the discussions. Yes, of course. I think that would be very interesting.
Yes.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vijay.
Nurul, I thought you had a question. You had your hand
Last
raised.
question, Bu Nurul Laili from Engineering Faculty. Bu Lili, are you here? Are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Question,
I,
please.
okay. Thank you. Thank you for the time, Mrs. Vita. And okay, good afternoon, Mr. Vijay. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm Nur Riley. Okay, in the conclusion, you said that artificial intelligence and machine learning is an important tool in fighting the current pandemic, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I want to ask, does that still have the benefit for us since the pandemic is over? How do these two, I mean, artificial intelligence and machine learning, help us even more after pandemic? Can they also help us identify new virus or maybe other types of coronavirus? Thank you.
Right, exactly. So that's one of the nice things about working in this space is all we are trying to do is we have a certain kind of a virus and we are trying to understand how this virus functions, and so we are trying to create models based off of our understanding, right? And so the virus has certain characteristics in terms of the number of proteins it has, the types of proteins and enzymes it has. And so we are trying to understand and model how this particular virus behaves, right? And so if we succeed in modeling the behavior of this virus, then when a new virus comes along, we could use this knowledge in either extending the models that we have built already or build a completely different model specific to that virus, right? And so, you said this pandemic is almost, done. It's kind of done, but it's still there. But the knowledge that we gain from understanding this virus and its behavior and the modeling that we can do would help us in creating newer models for other viruses. Or if this virus has different mutations, we should also be able to kind of model them so that using that knowledge, we can then predict, given a certain set of conditions, how else this virus might mutate. Because we have already had 4 or 5 mutations from the original virus structure, right? And so what caused the mutations? What are the effects of these mutations, right? So if we understand this process well, then we can use that knowledge to model newer viruses that might come in the future, right? And so that's probably is the main contribution of this work.
Okay, thank you.
Are you
Thank
happy
you,
fully
sir.
with the answer from Dr. Vijay? Okay, I think enough for the question and answer session. Dr. Vijay, allow me to take a picture first with you and with the participant before we continue with the session of discussion about our cooperation between Kadiri University and Oakland University, USA. Okay, for the all audience, the all participant, please turn on the camera. We will make an amazing picture between the participant and Dr. Vijay. And after that, we will continue the session with the discussion between the next collaboration between Kadiri and Oakland University. Okay, from the technician, please help me to take the best picture from the participant and Dr. Vijay. I will counting from now. Please turn on the camera. Okay. Has ready all? Okay, Mr. Sino, are you ready? Okay, please give the best smile for today. 1, 2, 3, go. Enough. Next slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, next slide. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, one more. The last slide. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, thank you for the participant and Dr. Vijay. Okay, Dr. Vijay, we continue our session today, the discussion between Kadiri University and Oakland University. We can start now.
Okay, all right. So I want to kind of keep it very informal. So I will provide some basic information about our university, and then we have signed a general MOU between our universities, and then we are working on some more specific kinds of agreements so that students from Kadiri can come to Oakland University and pursue different programs. And so we are working on different kinds of agreements. So I thought it will be a good idea to start with a very short video, less than 2 minutes long, that provides some information about our Oakland University. Okay? So let me share my screen. So I'm going to play this video that gives you some, visuals about how our campus looks like and about our program. Okay, so it's less than 2 minutes long.
Opportunity. It's what allows us to succeed and thrive at whatever we do. It allows us to advance and achieve more than we ever imagined. When opportunity is present, we can ascend beyond any limits. At Oakland University, you have the opportunity to reach your dreams. Even our founder knew, more than 50 years ago, that opportunity was the first step in soaring to success. That the future belongs to those with the drive to succeed, the knowledge to understand, and the willingness to take action. At Oakland, you're given everything you need to build a solid academic foundation that prepares you for unlimited possibilities. A foundation that takes learning beyond the books and places it in your hands and in your heart, pushing you to advance further than you thought possible. To a place where you encounter discoveries while building relationships with OU professors who know you by name. You can learn to educate by challenging others to be their best. You can learn to solve by opening the gates of innovation, and to promote healthy living by conducting advanced research. You can learn to listen, applying that knowledge when it matters most, and to lead by working on real projects for real companies. Or learn to think creatively and critically by navigating theory with practice. And you can seek to achieve amazing things alongside other scholars and faculty in a new home of excellence. You also learn to play, using your hard work and dedication to win. A student who was a dreamer is now a leader, determined and empowered. Empowered in a new home that's rooted in overachieving. We're going above and beyond and giving back to the community and campus as part of our culture. And that carries through to your life after graduation, giving your all to your career, your family, and your alma mater. This is your next chapter. It is within reach and without limits. These are the ladders to your future. This is OU, where the aspiring can rise.
So that video kind of gives you an idea about how our campus looks like, and lots of the programs on campus and things like that. Okay. So does everybody see my presentation file? So in this presentation, I have lots of slides. I don't think we have time to go through all of it. So I will point to some important aspects, and then I have shared this with Vita, and so you can get a copy of it from her if you want. Okay. Any questions so far?
Okay, maybe from the faculty's member and audience, if you want to ask a question about the possibility of our collaboration between Kadiri and Oakland, you can ask here.
Yeah.
Maybe Pak Diar want to go there. Mr. Vijay, is it possible for us, the faculty's member, to have some, what's it called, outside the management and information system faculties, is it possible for us to have some activity with another faculties there, maybe from economic, also from law and agriculture and
Yeah,
engineering?
absolutely. So, we can organize, some collaboration activities, and then we can have faculty exchanges kind of visiting both campuses. And so, as we get started, I think we can identify many such activities and then kind of carry on one at a time. Both student exchanges and faculty exchanges and things like that. So let me kind of talk a little bit about our university, our programs, and the agreements, and then we can kind of think about what are some immediate actions that we can take. Okay. So this entire presentation will take much longer time, but I will kind of stop at some specific slides so that we can give you some information about a couple of the programs that I manage.
Sorry, Dr. Vijay, we can't hear your voice.
Sorry, can you see the slides or no?
It's okay.
Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Okay. But when I put it in full presentation mode, you don't see it. Looks like. All right. So let me kind of give you some idea of where we are actually located within the US. So on the top, so this is the map of the US. So we are located in Southeast Michigan. So Michigan is surrounded by the Great Lakes, right? And so We are in a city called Rochester, which is about 35 to 40 miles north of Detroit. So we are the suburbs of Detroit. So Detroit is the biggest city in Michigan, and so we are suburbs of Detroit. So that's where our university is located. And so Chicago is on the west side. If you drive between Detroit and Chicago, it'll take about 4 hours depending upon the traffic. It's not very far. It's pretty viable. And so this is the location of Oakland University. Okay. So here are some images from Detroit. So this is downtown Detroit. The building on the top right, this is the headquarters building for General Motors. The building on my bottom right, this is the headquarters building for Chrysler. And the building to the bottom left is the Ford Motor Company headquarters building. Obviously, Detroit has the headquarters, for the three car manufacturers, U.S. car manufacturers, right? And then we also have lots of sports teams and outdoor activities, lots of music. If you're into music, a lot of the music in the U.S. came from Detroit in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Motown. This is a pretty small house from which all of the music in the 60s and 70s actually came from. And so Detroit has a very rich music legacy. Okay. So a little bit about our physical location within the U.S. Then about Oakland University. So we are about 20,000 students, and we have 127 bachelor's degree programs, about 110 graduate degree programs, and our student faculty ratio is about 19 or 20 to 1. So, this is very important for us because we work with our students quite closely. We know them by name, and so we work with our students in terms of placement, in terms of internships, things like that. And so we are a very, very close knit kind of a family. And Oakland is also the second safest campus in the United States. And so, it is very safe, and particularly this is important for international students because when students come from abroad, they want to go to a place where it is very safe and they feel comfortable. And so, like I said, our campus is the second safest campus in the whole of the U.S. And we have lots of green areas, woods and meadows on campus. It's about 1,400 acres, so it's pretty large campus in terms of area, and it also has some historic buildings. So this building, Meadowbrook Hall, this is one of the historic buildings on campus, and so it has a lot of interesting art collection. This used to be the summer home of Matilda Dodge, the Dodge Car Company. So they used to own this entire land, and they donated it to start the university. So it's a very interesting campus, very safe campus. My department, so I am in the School of Business, and within the School of Business, there are four departments actually. So Decision and Information Sciences, which is my department, I'm the department chair. We have accounting and finance, management and marketing, and economics. So those are the four departments in the School of Business. Within my department, we have undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. Undergraduate degrees in management information systems, operations management. So those are the two main undergraduate degrees. At the graduate level, we have Master of Science in Business Analytics and Master of Science in Information Technology Management. In addition to this two master's degrees, we also have Masters of Accounting and then MBA, Masters of Business Administration. Those are, and then we also started Master of Science in Finance. So those are the master programs that we have in the business school. And so I want to spend a few minutes talking about the two master's program that we have in our department. So the Master's in Business Analytics is a very popular program at the moment. There's a lot of demand for data analytics, business analytics. Then the other area is also cybersecurity or information security. Okay? And so we get a lot of international students for business analytics. It's an interdisciplinary program, and we have students from different disciplines, not only business and IT, but also students from engineering, students from biology, students from health science, because all disciplines have data, and so they want to analyze data, and so data analytics is a very, very interdisciplinary program. So we are open to any major, as long as they have some background in some mathematics and statistics, and also some IT and programming. If you don't have the necessary background, you can take one or two classes to get that background, and then continue on with the degree. Okay? And so I will talk about the structure of the program in the next couple of slides. So the Master of Science in Business Analytics, so these are the foundation courses. Like I said, we want to make sure that people have some quantitative background, like in statistics, and they have some background in IT. So if they don't, they can take one or more of these classes to get the necessary background before they start with the program. The program itself is made up of 10 subjects, 10 courses. We have IT core, a course in database, a course in project management, a course in business analytics. So this is the required core. And then we have 6 electives. So one of the courses that I teach is deep learning and text analytics. We cover a lot of AI modeling and applications. Introduction to Data Science is a machine learning class where we talk about standard machine learning models. And so we have a number of electives that we offer that students can choose from. And then eventually we have a capstone class where students work on an industry project. And so that's very big for us because we are very keen on experiential learning. So everybody has to do a capstone project. And it's actually industry sponsored project. So that's the structure of our master's program in business analytics. Very similar structure for information technology management. So we have the core and then the capstone. And then within the MSITM, you can have focus on information security so that you can take courses that are related to cybersecurity, network security, developing secure information systems and things like that. So one could focus on security or general IT management like strategy and policy, database development, application development, things like that. And so MSITM program gives you flexibility to focus on either cybersecurity or general IT management. So those are the two programs that are offered from my department. And so the program highlights, so basically both of these programs are STEM coded or STEM designated, science, technology, engineering, and math designation. So if a program has STEM designation, you can do practical training for 3 years instead of just 1 year. So that's a very big plus for international students. So after you finish your degree, you can stay up to 3 years and work in the US before you decide to go back a lot of times people find jobs, full-time jobs within that time period and then they just stay. Okay. So that's one interesting aspect of our program. I already mentioned the capstone course. We are very big on internships and placements. So we have people, joining automotive. Obviously, it's a big industry for us. Healthcare, financial sector, IT sector. So we have students working in all of these areas. We have pretty much 100% placement for our students. A lot of the students actually get jobs even before they graduate. They start internships in their last semester, and then they eventually get placed wherever they do internships or they find other employment. A lot of the students get placed before they graduate. We encourage students to participate in a lot of competitions, analytics competitions. We conduct a lot of workshops and events related to analytics and IT management. And so we encourage students to be quite active in the program and in the industry. So similarly, MSITM program is also STEM coded. Here are some projects, and obviously we do lots of projects for automotive industry. Like we have done projects for General Motors, Ford Motor Company, yes, Blue Cross Blue Shield is an insurance company, is a healthcare insurance company. So we have a lot of students work. So we have lots of employment opportunities in Southeast Asia because we have lots of companies. Okay. Not too long ago, we had MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, a signing ceremony. And so, I was on the call. Obviously, Vita and Rahul were on the call. So the person in the middle, this is the provost of our university. Rosemary Max is our international office director of global engagement. And so we had a very nice signing ceremony not too long ago. And so this MOU basically says Kadiri University and Oakland University will work on or collaborate on a number of things, including joint degree programs, student exchanges, faculty exchanges, research collaboration between faculty from OU and Kadiri, joint, academic programs. We can also organize conferences and workshops and things like that. So this general MOU is, just the initial agreement that we signed, basically saying that Kadiri and Oakland University would work together on many, many different areas. We are currently working on putting other agreements in place. So one of the things for international students is semester abroad program. So people from outside U.S. Can visit our university and spend a semester or maybe even 2 semesters, and then they can take some courses while they're here, and they can transfer those courses to their home institution. Or if they want to join our program, the MSBA and MSITM program, they can apply to those programs while they're here, and they can even take 1 or 2 classes, like for example the database class or the project management class. And if they want to continue in our program, then we will count them towards our degree. And so this semester abroad program is a very nice way for international students to come to Oakland University and spend the semester. They can come on I-20, and they will be paying in-state tuition as opposed to non-resident tuition. And then, whatever courses you take here could be counted towards the master's program if you decide to join the program. Okay, so that's one kind of agreement that we are planning to sign between Kadiri and Oakland University. Another agreement is specifically for our master's program, the business analytics and IT management. So, students completing an undergraduate degree at Kadiri can apply to our master's program, and they can be admitted to the program because there are several benefits based off of this agreement. So typically, when people apply for graduate programs in the US, you have to take a GRE or TOEFL exam, to demonstrate proficiency. You would also have to take TOEFL or any English proficiency language exam to demonstrate that you have enough working understanding of the English language, right? And so, if we sign this agreement, the GRE GMAT requirement would be waived. And also, people can pay in-state tuition when you join our program. Like I said, typically international students are charged non-resident tuition, which is quite high compared to resident tuition. And so, because of this agreement, students coming from Kadiri would be charged in-state tuition, so which is much cheaper compared to regular students. Uh, we also can admit graduate students. For example, at Kadiri, if somebody is doing a graduate degree like MBA or any master's program, they can join our program, and we can also accept up to 9 credits, relevant credits, of course. And so then when they come to Oakland University, they will take only the remaining 21 credits. So you can finish within 2 semesters quite easily. So when we sign this articulation agreement, it provides a lot of benefits for students from Kadiri to attend Oakland University. So like I said, GRE, GMAT will be waived. You will be charged in-state tuition. And obviously, you will have 3 years of practical training. One thing that you would have to do, which is required of all international students, is to do a transcript evaluation. So that's the process. And so basically what it does is if the transcript is not in English, or obviously it's from a different country, they will try to generate a transcript that's equivalent to a US degree. They will look at every course, and then they will certify that yes, this course is equivalent to a course that could be taught in the US. And then they will also compute a grade point average based on the US scale. In the US, we usually use a 4-point scale for grade point average. And so whatever the grading system is in the host country, they will convert it to a 4-point scale, and they will compute the GPA, grade point average on a 4-point scale. So the one thing that we will look for on this is for students from Kadiri to have at least 80% of 3.0 or better. Okay? And so that's the only requirement for admission. All other requirements are pretty much for students coming from Kadiri because of this agreement that we signed. Okay? And so there are lots of benefits for students coming from Kadiri, to Oakland University. The application process is with an online process. We will only look for 80% or higher score. That's it. Other than that, there are no other requirements. Okay. And so, if you're a graduate student, you have the option to transfer up to 9 credits. So, typically, they're taking a database class or project management class, regardless of where it is taught. There are standard topics that are part of these courses. So we will be happy to accept those credits to our program. And so, we are planning on signing, some of these agreements in the near future. And so hopefully students from Kadiri can take advantage of these agreements. One of the common questions that we get is, okay, how much does it cost?
Okay.
So like I mentioned, the graduate tuition per credit, non-resident is $1,027, whereas the in-state tuition is about $800. Okay? And so for 30 credits, roughly it will be about $24,000. So that's the tuition charge. And then there's a little bit more expense in terms of everybody has to have health insurance in the US. So that costs about $2,000. And then depending upon where you live, if you live on campus, it is actually quite expensive. So basically, what international students do is there are lots of apartments close by the university, and so typically students rent an apartment and share the apartment. So you rent a 3 bedroom or a 2 bedroom apartment, and then maybe 3 or 4 students share that apartment. So that way it's more cost effective, and then you can cook yourself if you prefer, and so that would also cut down a little bit of the cost. And so, for international students, staying close to the campus but not on campus seems to be the choice because they can save a lot of money. I mean, obviously, you can stay on campus as well, but it'll be, quite a bit more expensive. Okay. So that's, one of the common questions that we would get in terms of how much does it cost. Like I said, we are very big on internships and placements. So we are very aggressive in finding employment for our students. All of our students work in pretty
Mr.
decent
Vijay,
jobs.
we can hear your voice clearly. So if you don't mind, I will share this PPT to my faculty's member and also discussing with the higher management, and we will contact with you for further step our collaboration.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Because
So
it's not
this
so
is pretty
clear.
much sort of the end of the presentation. So there is some information about the
Yeah.
Center for Data Science. So I'm going to skip all of that.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of links, useful links
Yeah.
that you can also follow up. And then so this is the summary slide. And
Yes.
so, through the agreements, the students from Kadiri have lots of benefits. And so we welcome students from Kadiri to come to Oakland University.
Yes. Sure, doctor. Thank you, doctor, for the sharing the Oakland University, and we are sure that our faculty's member and student interest going there, like some faculties from economic. Dr. Dia has made your your university so much. Okay, thank you, Dr. Vijay, because the time is up. I think it is enough for our great webinar today. We wish that our webinar give us benefits, so our faculty's member and student can get some benefit from your presentation. And for another activity after this activity, maybe we can continue the collaboration between Oakland University USA and Kadiri with another activity, doctor, and we will keep in touch by sending the email about the next activity.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I can stick around for a little bit longer if anybody has any questions. But I know, we've taken quite a bit of time
Yeah,
already.
okay.
So
And then
I'm
it
sure you have all the
discuss with the
necessary.
faculty maybe. They have
Yeah.
amazing and want to go there, doctor, for the double degree or something else problem. I will communicate with the faculty first.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Very good. So thank you for the time, and it was very
Thank you
nice to
very much,
interact with
Dr.
everybody.
Vijay, for your nice presenting. Thank you for the participant for joining the webinar today. Have a nice day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye. See you.
Apa kabar? Namaste.
Apa kabar? Terima kasih.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you, sir.
So like I said, if anybody wants to have a chat, I'll be around for a little bit longer if you want to have any questions. The faculty to kind of get a better idea of what research